Hey guys, welcome back. If you just finished watching the last episode of the Subaru Forester engine removal, great, thanks for coming back. If you guys haven't seen that yet and you're wondering why we're pulling the engine out, I'll put a link to that video down below. But I'll give you a quick rundown. Broken timing belt, head gaskets are leaking, so we're not even gonna mess with trying to put a belt on it and see how many valves are bent. We're just gonna go for it. We're gonna yank the heads off. If the valves are bent, we'll put new valves in it, put new gaskets in it, we'll get the heads machined, put it all back together with new timing belt components. So that's where we're at. We already unhooked everything on the bottom, now we're doing the stuff on the top. My method of doing it, get everything done on the bottom side, get everything done on the top side. If you have to go back and forth a bunch of times, you're just wasting time. If you're doing it on the ground, it's not as big of a deal as if you're doing it on a rack. Now, I have the hood in a different position than I did last time. I just wanted to point that out. If you're working on a rack and you have an asymmetrical rack like I have, make sure your hood's not gonna hit the, the rack. That's gonna be a bad day for you if you do lift it up into that. But these hoods, unhook the washer line, you can flip the hood all the way back against the windshield. This windshield already has a crack in it, so I'm not too concerned, but I don't know if it'll actually hit the windshield, but it gets it out of your way, lets plenty of light into the engine bay. So do that step. You'll be happy. So there is no precise order on how I do these. It just kind of depends on how I feel that day. But today we are going to start at the back of the engine bay. We're going to get all the air cleaner stuff out of the way. So there's two mounting bolts on this resonator or silencer. Using this fancy flip socket from Snap-on. We'll flip that around and we will take the hose clamp loose, which is an 8mm or a 5/16. Flip that back around again. Actually, there's not. Sometimes there's an extra bolt over here, but this one doesn't have it. So we'll just take that air box loose from, or the intake loose from the air box. Throw our bolts in our bucket. There's going to be a couple of hoses attached to this air silencer. These are crankcase ventilation hoses coming from the valve cover. There's one just like this on the other side, and voila. So that's out of our way. Since I'm right here, I'm just going to take the air box out of the way, unplug the mass airflow sensor, get that off. It's not secured properly anyway, so I'll just take the whole thing apart. Normally I take it out as a unit, but that is a little dirty, so we might replace that. Since I'm pulling the whole engine out, I can leave the other half in there. If I was doing the heads in the vehicle, I would take the lower part of that base off. Okay, next, we have a couple of bell housing bolts we couldn't get to. All the other ones I was able to loosen up. I know I won't be able to get a perfect view of it. I took the lower starter nut off from the bottom. There's one bolt back here that's attached to this bracket that the engine ground is on, 14mm head. I'm gonna zap that out. The starter will come loose. Before I do that, we're gonna unhook this battery. Cables are just loose. I don't know. I don't even know where the battery hold down is. Probably something I'll have to buy. Starter's now loose. Let's get this bolt out of there. Oh, we got a few threads left. Long bolt. I think that's the longest of the bell housing bolts. And set the starter off to the side. There's one more bolt down here that we couldn't get to from below because the starter was in place. Now this bracket here is kind of in my way. It's just two 12mm bolts holding it in, so I'm going to zap that out of the way as well. Had to kind of jockey that starter out of my way to get to it. But now all the bell housing bolts have been removed. So you might be wondering why I'm still at the back of the engine. Well, there's one little bracket here. It's kind of a torque mount, I guess. Goes from the top of the bell housing to the firewall. Now there's a nut and a bolt on this side down here at the front of the engine, or back of the engine, forward part of the vehicle. And then back here, that nut is welded on, so don't try taking that off. We'll just take the bolt loose from the other side. Now we can just pop that torque mount out of the way. Okay, we have a few more things back here. Now I have all these bell housing bolts just loose. They're kind of hanging there. You can pull them all the way out if you want to. But up next, a little closer to the engine here, we have two electrical connectors. Now these are the main engine wiring harnesses. First thing I'm going to do is pull this 10mm bolt out. I guess you guys couldn't really see that one, but it holds this little bracket to the wiring harness. So if you don't pull that out, you'll have a hard time unplugging them. There is a little tab right here to depress. There we go, lift up on that. And as we flip this over, one side or the other should unplug, and I think it's this back side. There we go. Unplugs. This other one, this brown connector, doesn't have a fancy retaining thing like that. It just has a push button there. Okay. This wire down here I unclipped earlier when I dropped the exhaust. That's for the O2 sensor. It is still plugged in. I'll go ahead and unplug it just for safety's sakes, so I don't, rip that harness out by accident. This harness is going to stay with the vehicle, this part of the harness anyways. So this other connector here is for the rear O2 sensor. Now, keeping to the theme of, working at one part of the motor at a time, I find it easiest to take the throttle body off the intake because there's coolant hoses attached to the bottom of the throttle body, and they're kind of difficult to get to with the engine in place. So I just zap the 4 bolts out, they're 10mm headed bolts, and set the throttle body off to the side. Give it a little pop. Paper gasket, but they rarely ever tear. At least my luck, they normally don't. But if we get a headset, they should have a new gasket in there. I'm going to unplug the connector for the throttle body. So the coolant hoses are still attached to the throttle body, but at least I can get it kind of out of the way. I don't have to worry about those coolant hoses at the immediate moment. I'm just going to work my way around this engine. So next up is the passenger side of the engine. 2 10mm bolts. This is for the power steering lines. One's pressure line, one is return line. The reservoir's up here. Now somebody's put some multi-duty line on here. They normally don't have that. So I don't know if that's going to hinder me or not. There's a little retaining clip on the back of the reservoir. You can lift the reservoir up and gain a little bit of flexibility with these lines to kind of keep them out of your way. Next thing I'm going to pull out is the intake manifold bolts on this side. Now they're way down here at the bottom. If you have a vehicle that has kind of 2 layers, there's a seam right here in the middle. Don't take it loose at the upper seam. Take it loose down here. They're 12mm headed bolts. They're fairly long. There's one there. There's 2 down here straddling the fuel line, and then 1 back there. A lot of times I just leave those bolts in the intake. I don't really worry about taking them out unless I'm going to flip the intake over. Okay, while I'm over here, I'm going to undo the 2 spark plug wires. They are oil saturated. Valve cover gaskets have been leaking, so we may have to get a set of those. Leave them like that. And we're pretty much done over on this side. Oh, not quite. I almost missed something. We would have found it eventually. Take these 2 harnesses off of that bracket. Sometimes it's easier to take the bracket off to feel the tab. The tab is right there at the back where the wires go in. This one slides forward. I think this other one slides towards the back of the vehicle. I can't quite remember. I may have to look with the mirror. Okay, I think this one slides off to the side. See if I can blindly release the retaining clip. Yes, it does. It slides off to the side. Let me flip this over. I'll show you where that clip is. Do we have enough harness? Yes, we do. There we go. So now, depending on the vehicle, sometimes they do slide off the back or off the front. This one went off the side. I know a Subaru Baja we did in our workshop the other day for a training class slid off backwards, and it had the same retaining clip. So I just lifted up on that clip and slid it off the side. I think this is the last thing on this side of the engine, but you know, there's always something I missed. There should be a ground wire like this on the other side as well. It goes to the cylinder head, grounds to the fender, unclips, so pop that loose. And now we're gonna move towards the front of the vehicle. We already unhooked everything from the bottom of the radiator, so it won't be that bad to take the radiator out the rest of the way. We have the upper radiator hose. Now these use the same style wire clamp as the tranny cooler lines did, only a lot bigger. So don't lose the pieces if you're planning on reusing it. And then I'm gonna leave the cooling fans on the radiator. We unplugged them from down below, so we don't really need to separate those from the radiator. Next is just two 12 millimeter headed bolts for our radiator hold down brackets. Now our radiator should lift out. My lower hose is still attached to the radiator. Like so. Now we can lay this down flat. Nothing should leak out. Now what that did is that just gave us a whole bunch of room up front to work on the rest of it, because we have to pull all these accessories off of the engine. I'm going to pull the Serpentine belt shields off. 10 millimeter nut on the end and a bolt and another bolt. That one was loose. This one here is held on by the alternator pivot bolt. So I'm just going to loosen that up. The bracket slides out. Chuck it off to the side. There's a bolt right here, holds the alternator on the tensioning side, and then I'm just going to loosen up this bolt at the top. I just want to take the slack off the belt, and then I'll pull the other bolt out the rest of the way. If you pull this bolt out while there's tension on it, you have the potential of damaging the threads in the alternator. Up next is the air conditioning tensioner. Tensioner pulley's down here at the bottom. We're going to loosen up the retaining nut. Just a few turns. Loosen up the tensioner. Once we have slop in the belt, I'm going to pull the two bolts that hold the tensioner to the block. If your vehicle has a stretch fit belt for the air conditioner, you're supposed to just cut it and replace it. If you want to try and take it off, go for it. We already have the battery out. I'm going to unhook the positive lead to the alternator. There is a lock washer as well, so make sure you don't lose that. And I'm just going to put that nut back on the alternator. I'm going to pick the alternator up a little bit since I don't have the bolt holding it in place. Makes it a little easier to unplug the control wires. Now we're going to take the pivot bolt out the rest of the way. Now there is a funky nut on the back side there, so don't lose that. It's kind of handy. It has these two locking tabs on it that keep it in place, so you don't have to worry about putting a wrench back there when you tighten up the bolt. Long bolt will take all the way out, thread it back into that nut. And now our alternator is off. Up next is power steering pump. Now there is an electrical connector on the back of the power steering pump right here. Unhook that wire. It's a power steering pressure switch. Bumps the idle up a little bit when you're under heavy power steering load. We have an oil pressure switch here and the crank sensor here. We will have to unhook all of these because the harness will come off with the intake manifold. Okay, I'm going to pop the wiring harness loose, or this connector loose, from the power steering pump. Oil pressure switch and crankshaft position sensor. Get those kind of out of our way a little bit, and we can see down here at the back of the power steering pump, right back here is a 12 millimeter bolt that goes into the block. Sometimes the threads like to come out with that bolt. Not sure why. Actually, all three of the power steering pump bracket bolts do that. I think they get over torqued and there's such a small bolt, but we'll go ahead and zip it out of there. We have two more bolts on the front of the power steering pump bracket. Now these are normally Loctited in. But they come out fairly easy. Need a short extension for that guy. Now we can take the whole pump and bracket and everything and lay it off to the side. Okay, now we have a decision to make. Since I'm in an automotive repair shop, I'm going to suck the Freon out of the air conditioning system and remove the compressor. If you're doing it in your driveway, you don't have the equipment for that. There is enough flex in the line, both of the lines, to unbolt the AC compressor and lay it off to the side. But I'm going to hook the machine up, recover everything down, because when I'm done, I'm going to want to fully charge this air conditioning system up anyways. While this is sucking down the Freon, I'm going to take off the bracket bolts for the AC compressor, take off the electrical connectors, and then once it's done recovering, we'll take the lines off. Okay, this harness is held in by this little clip. It's got kind of a ratcheting mechanism on it. Pop that retainer loose. We have the AC compressor clutch control wire, and then we can kind of fish these wires through, but we can just wait until we pull the lines off and then they'll come right out of there. For the AC compressor bracket, we have one bolt right down there. Is it going to focus on it? There we go. 14 millimeter headed bolt right down there. We have a 14 millimeter bolt here, one here, and I believe there's another one. Yeah, there's another one hiding underneath there somewhere. Some more Loctite. Now there's one bolt kind of hiding back here, halfway under the intake manifold. Okay, that one there, and then the one over here by the dipstick tube. Okay, AC compressor bracket is unbolted. I'm gonna leave the compressor attached to that. Let me check the status of our recovery here. Just about done. Okay, we're pulled into a vacuum. That is good enough. Two lines on the AC compressor to unhook. That guy there. And bump the camera here. I like to replace these O-rings anyways, so it doesn't hurt my feelings to take these off. Common leak spot for Subaru AC systems. Now that those are off, I can take the AC compressor and bracket out of the way. Now this other AC hose, the high side line, bolts onto the condenser right here. I'm just gonna pull it off as well. Get it out of my way. If you are not recovering your Freon and you're just laying your compressor off to the side, you may have to pull the washer reservoir, which is underneath the camera, so you have enough room for that compressor to rotate. Okay, now I got tons of space up here. Pop this wiring harness loose from the oil fill. It's our alternator harness. We'll kind of tuck it out of the way. Now the fuel lines, there's going to be a pressure, return, and a evap line here. Now some of these are returnless and you won't have both lines, but the way they're set up is pretty much the same. Now these do take a special tool to release them. If you don't have the tool, you can release it. There are some hose clamps on these pressure pulse dampeners, so you can take them loose there and leave the lines on the engine. I think we'll have the special tools, so we'll probably just take those off. We'll have to take the spark plug wires loose, which are down there. We have the ground wire I mentioned on the other side. I'll just, while it's in my hand, go ahead and pop that loose. Pop these plug wires out. Now it is a little more convenient if you pull the washer bottle, but we can get those out of there with it in place. There's only 2 bolts to pull the washer bottle, so don't be afraid to do that. I'm also going to unplug the camshaft position sensor. So I'm just going to unplug that. The rest of the stuff that this wire harness goes to, we shouldn't have to unhook it. Everything should come with the intake manifold. So the ground's off, the cam sensor's unhooked, plug wires are released. Now we just need to unbolt the intake manifold. To release these fuel lines, because this fuel line is so close to this bracket, this tool works the best for me. I'm not sure if there's another tool that works better. So, you know, you have the 2 halves, so I can get 1 half in here. Actually, I think there's an updated one in my AST or Ossenmacher tool set, but this one's a Blue Point one. We just put the 2 halves in there like so. This piece holds it all together. Push in on the line slightly, push in on the blue clips, and pull the line off. Now keep in mind, there's a little bit of fuel pressure there. You know, make sure you got your safety squints on. Do the same thing with this bottom line. Yeah, I think the AST toolkit has 2 different colored pieces that, you know, go together to make the complete unit. Little spring clamp for the evap purge line. Back behind here we have the brake booster vacuum hose. And we're kind of done with this section. Now we have a few more things to do back over here. You know, we're working our way to the back of the intake manifold once again, but there's only a few more things we have to do over here, and not every vehicle has these. Next on our list is the EGR system. So we don't have to take the EGR valve off, which is right there, but we do need to take the EGR pipe off. Now the bad thing is we do have to take it off from the cylinder head, which is down there. It's not any easier to get to from down below. I normally just reach my hand down in there and feel kind of blind for the pipe. I can't remember if it's a 21 or 22. I normally use a standard wrench. I'll tell you what size it is that I use. I just have this one oddball combo wrench, and it's a 7/8, so 22 millimeter. Now, once you get it broke loose here in Colorado, they typically, you know, just unthread fairly easily. And we're going to work blindly on that lower pipe. See if I can get on there. Now this only goes back in one way. It's kind of weird offset on it. This one has a heat shield on the top, but that's the pipe. Now I'm going to leave you guys situated over there while I remove this intake manifold. There are a few wires we need to unhook once we start lifting up this intake manifold. So we need to make sure that, first of all of our stuff is coming with the intake that needs to come with the intake. The throttle body won't be coming with the intake, but as we lift up on this, there should be a couple of connectors we have to unhook from the back side over there. No, that's holding us up. PCV hose. I always forget something. And then if I just tilt this back, we have a single wire connector over here for the knock sensor. It's a brown connector right there. That should be all that's on that side. And then we should have a coolant temp sensor over here. And don't lift too hard because you'll break the connector or break the sensor. Okay, sensor is unplugged. And that's it. Our favorite hose clamps again. Don't lose the pieces. Oh, leaked a little bit of coolant out there. Probably leak a little more here. Okay, heater hoses are removed. Last step, I think. Take this little rubber plug out. That's the reason I pull the intake. It's just so much easier to get to that plug. I got to pull the intake manifold anyways. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to rotate the engine over. And this is the flex plate. That's going to roll over as well, and we're going to see the flywheel bolts. Now, since this doesn't have compression, I can just grab the crankshaft and there it is. With that intake manifold out of the way, and grab an impact and just zap these out, hopefully. Don't drop them because they will fall into the bell housing, and that's just inconvenient. There should be 4 of them. Oh, there's that one cylinder with a little bit of compression. There's probably one cylinder that had the valves closed. So now, as I rotate the engine, you can see the torque converter back behind it is not rotating with the flex plate. Actually, as I rotate it past this point, I can feels like the piston's hitting a valve or something. Okay, now we need to get a chain on the engine. If you have the AC compressor bracket there, that's one of the designated lift points. The other one is the bracket that holds our electrical stuff on in the back. There's a little loop there. I normally just have all that stuff off anyways, so I'm going to run a bolt into the AC compressor bracket location. Maybe. Bolt's a little long, but should work. And then the other one, yeah, I could probably hook it. Nah, it's going to pull it off centered. So I'll probably go to this smaller bolt hole in the back if I can tighten a bolt down all the way and feel like it's secure. Now that bolt back here isn't used for anything on this engine, so there's never been a bolt down it. I'm gonna flip my chain around. I don't have a swivel on mine. I'm gonna flip it the other way around so the chain will sit correctly in it, like so. Now I'm going to start to lift up on this. I do need to support the transmission, but I'll get a little bit of pressure up off the engine first and the transmission before I support the transmission. So the engine is just coming off of the cross member. I'm going to lift it a little more until I get it about where I want it for separation from the transmission, which is probably about there. That should clear fine. Now we need to support the transmission. Okay, to support the transmission, I'm going to use a floor jack, but I'm going to put a board on there. Now, that board has carpet on it. It doesn't really matter. That's just an old board off my boat trailer. But you want a fairly wide surface area, because it's very common for these Subarus to come in after somebody's worked on them. They didn't use a board, or they pushed up on the middle of the transmission pan and messed it all up. And I'm also going to, lift from one of the sides of the pan. I don't want to really lift in the center of the pan. If I had the exhaust out of the way, I could lift from the front a little bit easier. But at the edge of the pan, there's a little more support. So what happens if you lift from the center, it oftentimes can push the pan into the solenoids and either break the solenoids or pinch the wiring. So I'm just going to lift up a little bit. And what that's going to do is allow us to lift the engine off of there and still have the transmission be supported. Okay, now that the transmission is supported, we should be able to separate the engine from the transmission. Now, depending on how stuck it is, we may have to pry it off in a few spots. I'll give it a little wiggle first, see if I can separate it. But sometimes the dowel pins are just rusted up, and even in Colorado, they get stuck on there. I've got a gap started. Sometimes you just gotta lift up and push down. Keep in mind we do have the transmission on a jack, so we don't wanna slam it around too much. Maybe, just maybe, I can get on this bracket. Don't wanna break anything. Get a little more wiggle. I think it's starting to go. There we go. Just needed to stick my little pocket screwdriver in there. I wasn't prying with it. Don't worry. Okay, that side came loose of the dowel pin. Once this starts coming loose, we need to verify that we have the torque converter separated from the flex plate. There it goes. We are starting to get a gap back there. It looks like my torque converter is staying in the transmission. You want to make sure that it separates from the flex plate where we unbolted it. If you pull this engine out and the torque converter is still attached, you're going to make a heck of a mess, because transmission fluid is going to go all over the place. You may need to lift the transmission up just a little bit. Now we have to go forward quite a ways because we have to come off of those lower studs that are in the block, the two nuts that we pulled loose on the bell housing. And those should be clear, yep. Now we can start going up. Make sure you don't catch on the torque converter as you're going up. Those studs do stick out quite a ways. Now, as I'm lifting this out of here, you know, I'm kind of looking and feeling for any resistance on the engine. Make sure I'm not catching on anything. Make sure there's no wires that I missed. Some of the newer ones have ground wires on the bottom of the cylinder heads. So instead of having them up top where I took them loose, there'll be one on each side underneath. Okay, we have the engine out of the engine bay. Next step, put it on an engine stand, start taking it apart. Find out if we have bent valves. If we do, get those replaced. Either way, we gotta get the heads machined, new gaskets, new timing belt component kit, get everything reassembled before we can go back in the vehicle. So if you're interested in seeing the follow-up videos, make sure you stay tuned. If you're not subscribed already, make sure you subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Questions, comments, put those down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.